Selamlar arkadaşlar. ChinaImportPortal.com'un kurucusu Frederick'le beraber çok güzel bir yayın yaptık. Bu yayın biraz teknik tabirler içeren bir yayın. Fakat daha sonra ürünlerim gümrüğe takıldı ya da ürünlerim etiketleme yüzünden şikayet aldı dememeniz için mutlaka izlemenizi tavsiye ederim. Aynı zamanda arkadaşlar Frederick'in anlattığı İngilizce slaytı Türkçeleştirerek blogumuza koydum. Onun da linkine video tanımından ulaşabilirsiniz. Sorularınız olursa gerek bizim Facebook grubumuzdan gerek çok etiketleme ile ilgili spesifik sorular olursa Frederick'in Facebook grubundan sorularınızı yöneltebilirsiniz. Teşekkür ediyorum arkadaşlar. İyi seyirler dilerim.
Hey, thank you for bringing me on here. It's an honor. As you just mentioned, my name is Frederick, and I'm one of the co-founders of ChinaImportPortal.com. We are an online platform. We help importers worldwide to manufacture products in Asia, and specifically that's mainland China and Vietnam. Right now, actually, in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon in southern Vietnam, and our main office is in Sheung Wan in Hong Kong. In this video, I'm here with Igit to discuss and introduce you to product labeling requirements in the United States and the European Union. And a labeling requirement, I think you're all aware of this. You can see it on every charger, on every watch, on pretty much every product that you have. There's some sort of label. Could be made in China, the CE mark, which is actually used also in Turkey. And these are legal requirements. So that's what I'm going to introduce to you today. Now, if you take a look at this video, first I will explain what the product labeling requirement is. Then I will explain what it actually takes, like practically, to comply with labeling requirements. How do you make a product become compliant? And a brief overview of labeling requirements in the US and also in the European Union. Right, so what is a labeling requirement? A few different types of labeling requirements. We have the country of origin label, made in China, well, if it's manufactured in China, made in Vietnam, if it's manufactured in Vietnam, and so on. Now, this is mandatory in the United States. It's not mandatory in the European Union, for example.
I didn't know
Australia,
that.
for that matter.
I didn't know that. I thought it was always mandatory in every single country.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. And the reason is that if you go and you buy an iPhone, now the thing is that you take a product like the iPhone, Apple and these big brands, they make one batch that they can sell worldwide. So that's the reason why they put all the compliance marks that they need to have to sell into all these different markets. But the country of origin mark is actually distinctly American. It's actually not required in well, it's pretty much only the US. I'm sure there are a few other countries out there, but the European Union, and as far as I know, I don't think it's required in Canada. It's not required in Australia. So it's quite unique for the US. But it's such a big market, so you find it everywhere. Yeah. Now, then we have the compliance marks. You may be familiar with this. The CE mark is one. You find a CE mark on everything from bicycle helmets to phone chargers to power banks, even watches. And a compliance mark is a label that basically telling the consumer that this product complies with the regulations that apply to this specific product. And this is a fair bit more complicated because compliance marks also come with requirements to issue documentation, certification, lab testing, and so on. But that's a different topic. Now, in addition to CE, there's also the FCC mark that you may see on electronics in the US. So you have a few different types of compliance marks. Number 3, we have product description. And this may apply in most cases to the packaging. And it could, for example, cover user instructions, material, size, quantity, warning labels, something you see on children's products and toys all the time. Now, one thing I want to make clear is that different labeling requirements apply to different products. And of course, different labeling requirements in different countries or different markets, more specifically these days. Now let's move on. Can I trust my manufacturer in Asia to ensure compliance with all labeling requirements in my market? And this is a big misunderstanding, a big misconception. The thing is that your supplier, be it in China or Vietnam or elsewhere in Asia, is not likely to even have a basic understanding for labeling requirements that apply in, say, the US or the European Union. And the reason is that manufacturers are not compliance lawyers. This is not what they do. It's not their responsibility to keep track of every single labeling requirement that applies in countries around the world. And I think a lot of American and European importers, they have this attitude that, well, we are the biggest markets in the world, so of course they should know how to comply with regulations in our markets. But it's not like that. So practically what it means to make a product compliant is to actually submit a label file. And that also brings us to the next question. How do I communicate the labeling requirements to the supplier? Okay. Now say I want to import this. I want to import a t-shirt. I want to import a t-shirt from Vietnam. And I want to sell it in the United States. This means I've got to comply with two sets of labeling requirements. First, we have the country of origin. So that's made in Vietnam. That has to be right here in the neck label. Okay. Now, second, we also have textiles labeling requirements. And you can see that on every neck label back here in the neck, every t-shirt sold, well, legally sold in the US or also Europe for that matter. So in the US, a textiles label must include the fiber composition, and that's a fabric. That could be 100% cotton, 98% cotton, 2% spandex. You get the point. It should also include the care instructions. There should be ASTM, care symbols, or care instructions explaining washing, drying, and so on. Okay, and this is a legal requirement. It's not optional. You have to get these. You have to get this information in the label. So I
think many people skip this step. Like I've seen many people just thinking that putting made in China will be enough for the customs. Actually, we did this mistake in the previous years as well, and I think probably close to 1,000 units got stuck at the customs, and we had to destroy them because it was so costly to send them back to China or to Turkey. So it was actually cheaper if we destroyed them. So we just did it.
Yeah, true story. These things happen all the time. And it's such a small thing as missing a label or getting the label wrong, as you say, because it's not just about getting one piece of the label right. You need to have the entire label matching the requirements. So as an importer, or as an e-commerce seller based in Turkey, but looking to sell, say, on Amazon in the US or maybe Amazon in Germany or something like that, you have to understand the labeling requirements in your specific target market and then design the label accordingly. That's the key. So practically, this means that you go into Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or, well, even Paint, it doesn't matter. You create a label file, you send this to the supplier, you tell them, okay, make sure this label file is applied to the neck of the t-shirt, for example. If it's a t-shirt, you shouldn't put a text-size label on a power bank. And then when you do a quality control, you follow up to verify that the label is actually there. So that's how we communicate it. Now, you already answered this question. What can happen if the products are incorrectly labeled? And yes, they can actually be confiscated by the customs and destroyed. I do know that there is some flexibility and the customs can actually allow that the products are relabeled. But as you just mentioned, even though that is allowed, it's too expensive. So in most cases, it's just not an option. And it's a nightmare scenario, but it might be cheaper to just get it destroyed. And for someone starting off a business, that's a mistake you can't afford.
That's very true.
Now, let's take a look at a very brief overview of labeling requirements in the US. Just want to make it clear, this is just an introduction. These are not every single labeling requirements that apply in the US, but just a brief overview. As I mentioned, country of origin is mandatory, and that applies to pretty much every single product. If it's made in Vietnam, that's made in Vietnam. If you manufacture in Turkey, that's made in Turkey. If it's made in China, then made in China, and so on. Now, a few other things to consider. There's also CA Prop 65, is California Proposition 65. It's a regulation that restricts chemicals and heavy metals. And this applies to consumer goods sold in California. The thing is, California is a very big market, even though it's just one state. So a lot of e-commerce companies, a lot of importers, they actually decide to comply with CA Prop 65. And CA Prop 65 gives you the option to either get the product lab tested, or you can apply a warning label. And this warning label it's pretty severe. It says something like, this product can cause birth defects, or this product can cause reproductive damage. And, personally, if I see a product and it's a big label telling me that, okay, this product might make me sterile, I might not buy that one. So for that reason, you can either label or you can go for lab testing.
Actually, I would like to emphasize this, the second point, because, you can send your products to United States and then to the Amazon warehouses, but still you might not be able to sell them in California. If that is the situation, it means probably like 30% reduction in your total sales. So you have to be super careful with this CA Prop 65.
Yeah. The thing is, it's not hard to get it lab tested. You're looking at maybe 150 to 300 USD. And then you get a test report. You can show this to Amazon and to other customers that you may have. So that is definitely something to invest in. Now, number 3, we have CPSIA. And CPSIA is that's a federal regulation. It's a framework regulation that applies in every state in the US, unlike CA Prop 65. And CPSIA, it covers labeling, it covers documentation, it covers lab testing, but I'm focusing on labeling requirements today. So if you want to import toys or other children's products to the US, you need to have something called a tracking label. And the tracking label should include information that can, help you track the product. So essentially a batch ID. That's what it's about. And information about the seller, the company importing the product into the US. Now, a batch ID is any sort of code. You can find this everywhere. And normally you can decide how to structure this, or the format of this batch ID. But the point of the batch ID is that if you keep selling products in the US and then something goes wrong, like there's something that's wrong with the material, maybe it's toxic, maybe it's lead in the paint or something like that, or maybe, it could be any other form of defect, then you need to have a way to track those products and remove them off the market. And that's why you need to have a tracking ID, because otherwise you're going to end up with a scenario where, okay, I don't know which of my products are defective. I don't know which are non-compliant. So I'm going to have to buy back every single product. That's not a good way. So for that reason, you need to have a tracking label. Now, the good thing is that you can find information about this on the CPSC website. It's cpsc.gov, and you can even find tracking label samples. So it's pretty straightforward. It's not that hard to find information. Number 4, we have the FCC. It applies all over the US. And the FCC regulates electronics, or more specifically, communication between electronic devices. So anything with a CPU, anything that can communicate radio, and that's Wi-Fi, that's Bluetooth, and so on. That's regulated by FCC standards. And for some products, but not all products, you need to have an FCC label showing that this product is tested and compliant according to standards administered by the FCC.
I know that customs take FCC very seriously as well. Like, let's say you are selling Bluetooth earphones, and if you don't have the FCC, your products are going to get stuck as well.
Yeah, exactly, because it's, as you say, it's a Bluetooth earphones or headphones. wireless communication, FCC, and then it gets strict. So that's the thing, it could get caught by the customs, or you might get caught by Amazon because they're pretty strict on these things too.
For some reason, wireless, they're okay with the word wireless, but they're super sensitive about Bluetooth. I don't know why there's even a difference, but there is.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I just know that they are strict.
Yeah, they are.
Right, number 5, we have apparel and textiles labeling, as I just mentioned. So for apparel and textiles, what really matters is the fiber composition, and that details the material. Say 100% polyester, 100% cotton. Well, depends on the fabric. And then the care instructions, covering washing and drying and so on. And you could have this as symbols. If you want symbols, you need to use a specific format. It's called the ASTM. It's an ASTM type of symbol. Or you can use written text instructions. So there's some flexibility. Okay. Now, what's also interesting is that to most products, you have to consider more than one set of labeling requirements. So say that you're importing t-shirts and you want to sell this in California. Okay, country of origin, CA Prop 65, and number 5, apparel and textiles labeling requirements. And if this is a children's t-shirt sold to anyone age 12 or younger, you also have to comply with the CPSIA tracking label. So you see, you can have more than one set of regulations applying to one product. And that's when it gets a bit complicated. Right, EU, the European Union, is actually, what's interesting is that in the US, which is one country, you have state regulations, you have federal regulations, they overlap, and it can be complicated to understand how to comply with regulations in the US. The EU, on the other hand, which is not a nation state, which is not a country in that sense, is actually much more straightforward. It's much easier to understand EU regulations. I would say it's easier to sell into the European Union overall. Now, the big labeling requirement in the EU, which, if I'm not incorrect, is also used in Turkey, is the CE mark.
Yeah,
and the CE mark can be found on electronics, on toys, on bikes, on machines, on watches, on so many products. It's 26 or 27 different categories of products. And the CE mark is basically telling the consumer that, okay, this product is compliant with the regulations that apply to this product. And of course, there are different regulations that apply to, say, this power bank. And you can see the CE mark here compared to, say, these glasses. Now, this CE itself is not a standard. However, it shows that, okay, when I buy, say, sunglasses, or I buy this power bank, I know that this power bank is compliant with the regulations in the EU that apply specifically to power banks, okay? So that's what the CE mark is about. Now, a couple of other things. It's the WE mark. This applies to electronic recycling. This is specific for electronics and only used by domestic importers. Number 3, we also have the apparel and textiles labeling requirement. And it's the same. It's very basic. Fiber composition and also the care instructions. However, there's no country of origin labeling requirement, at least not yet. EU is actually more straightforward. It's easy to comply, and it's normally the CE mark that you have to be watching out for. So yeah, that was an introduction. There are other requirements in Australia and so on. And of course, countries around the world. One thing that we're seeing more and more is, for example, in Singapore, they actually they accept compliance marks for, say, the EU or the US. So the only country right now that's actually implementing their own set of regulation is China. So in the future, it's likely we're going to see US, EU and Chinese regulations. And if we go maybe a decade or so in the future, it's not impossible that the EU and the US will also merge their standards in a way which would be a very good foundation for other countries.
Well, actually, I would like to underline a couple of points that you made. First thing is, most sellers, they think that either their manufacturers or their freight forwarders know about the labeling requirements. Well, actually, some of them do, but the problem is the regulations keep changing all the time, and they might not be up to date, or their knowledge might not be up to date. So you have to figure that out yourself. You have to make your own research, or you should talk to a professional, especially if you are making a bigger investment, because freight forwarders, all right, they know how to ship the products, but I have seen scenarios where they cause so much problem as well. So you have to be confident that you provided the legal grounds and all the requirements. Otherwise, it might be a little bit too late to worry about it.
Yes, indeed.
I actually just have a personal question. I always wanted to know this. Maybe you have an idea. I'm not sure if you do. So if you think that, let's assume that somebody violated the labeling requirements. And what are the chances that it is going to be inspected? Do you have a ratio about it?
You mean inspected in the customs?
Yeah, in the US customs, to be specific.
Oh, I would say that risk is less than 10% in the customs. They don't have the resources to inspect every single product. Now, the thing though is that even if you get the goods through the customs, which is actually quite likely, then you may face issues later on, as you could face issues with Amazon, or you could have a customer that could actually report you for not having the right labeling requirements. And there's also something called internal market surveillance. And what this means is that you have government agencies in say the EU or the US, and they even go to online stores to buy products. So if they go and they buy this power bank from a random online store, and they don't really buy it as a government agency, they call themselves John Johnson or whatever, and you wouldn't even know, and they take a look, okay, what do we have here? All right, this is not correctly labeled, and then they get in touch with you. So even if the goods get through the customs, it's a pretty high risk that something else will happen down the line at a later point in time.
Even for the government agencies, your competitors are more likely to do that.
That too, I forgot about that, but you're absolutely 100% right about that. That's something to be very, very careful about. And the thing is, when it comes to labeling requirements, it's easy. It's not that hard to find information. So it doesn't really cost anything. You just create a label file, send it to the supplier, do a quality check so that you know that they actually have it correctly labeled it, and that's it.
Well, I think this will be an appropriate moment to maybe mention about your Facebook group as well, because you just launched it a couple of weeks ago. Before then, you used to have your blog and your forums, but now you have your Facebook group as well, which I think is a little bit more interactive. So in the Facebook group, I'm 100% sure that you will be able to get valuable information, either from the other sellers or from Frederick himself. So I really suggest that you follow Frederick's Facebook group as well.
Yeah, everyone is welcome aboard, and we have been online. Our website is one of the biggest blogs when it comes to manufacturing in Asia. And last week we also launched, as you mentioned, the Facebook group, and we respond to questions about manufacturing products in China, Vietnam, India, and beyond. So everyone is welcome aboard. And can I also present the ebook in case anyone is interested?
Please go ahead.
So I got on the slides already. So if you want to, you can go to chinaimportal.com/ebook, and you get an ebook that will introduce you to the basics of manufacturing products in Asia, covering how to go step by step through the process, how to identify qualified suppliers, how to manage the shipping and customs process for the United States, the EU, and other markets. So in addition to the Facebook group, you can also go right here to chinaimportal.com/ebook. And yeah,
I read this book, and it is super efficient. I really suggest everybody reads this book because, like, especially if you are new to the topic, you will learn so much about it.
Thank you. Glad to hear that.